Some people need an alarm clock, but not me. My eyes open every morning at 6 sharp, just as they have for the past 45 years. It doesn't matter if I went to bed late or if I feel tired. The habit is stronger than my body. Years of, working the same schedule have carved it into me like a mark that can't be erased. Yet waking up early these days feels different. There is no voice beside me telling me to close my eyes and sleep a little longer. No warmth under the covers, except my own. Felicity used to be there, breathing softly, her hair spread on the pillow. Since she passed, I've been alone, and the silence hits me hardest at dawn. After her death, I moved into the smaller guest bedroom. I could have stayed in the big room we once shared, but I couldn't bear it. Her things are still there, untouched. The old dressing table remains against the wall with her favorite comb resting on it, caught with a few strands of gray hair. There's a half-empty bottle of her perfume, too. Sometimes I twist the cap and breathe it in, and for a moment, it feels like she just stepped out of the room. It's been 5 years, but I've never had the heart to clear any of it away. Maybe I never will. Our home in Burley is a modest 2-story house with a little garden out front. Felicity loved roses and planted them herself. She could make them bloom as if the soil listened only to her. Now it's my job to look after them, though. I'm not nearly as skilled. Some days they survive in spite of me, not because of me. Occasionally, Mrs. Parker, the neighbor, drops by to trim the bushes and tell me stories about her grandchildren. She lingers, often hinting I should join her for tea, but I always decline politely. I'm not ready for company beyond small talk, and certainly not ready for anything resembling a new relationship. At my age, 67, I see many of my peers finding second partners, building second families. That path is not for me. I start the day in the same routine. A splash of cold water on my face, then I pull on a gray sweater and dark pants. My breakfast hasn't changed in years. Plain oatmeal with a cup of black tea. Felicity always said oatmeal kept people healthy and prolonged life. She was wrong about that. She left me at just 60, gone in an instant from a sudden stroke. No warnings, no second chances. Now I sit at the table stirring the bland porridge, staring out the window at Walnut Street. The road is as empty as I feel some mornings. We bought this house here 30 years ago when the street was livelier, when families filled the sidewalks and children played outside. Time has washed all that away. By 8:30, I'm already at the print shop. Flood's printing yard. It has carried that name since 1980, when it was nothing more than me and an old machine shoved into my garage. Back then, I printed business cards and letterheads for anyone who'd give me the chance. Slowly, with years of labor, I built it into a real shop, full of modern machines with 12 employees and steady customers from across the city and even nearby towns. It isn't an empire, but it pays the bills, supports me comfortably, and still helps the family when needed. Or at least it used to. These days, family feels like a difficult word to say. When Felicity died, whatever fragile thread tied me to my daughter, Margaret, grew even weaker. She always believed I loved the business more than her. Maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. Building something from nothing takes every ounce of strength, and I know I wasn't the father she wanted. She grew up with that resentment carved deep inside her. Now, at 45, she still demands from me the affection and attention she feels was denied in her childhood. Nothing I do seems to make up for the past. The print shop hums when I arrive. The smell of ink and paper is everywhere, soaked into my very skin after all these years. Felicity used to joke I smelled like books, and she meant it fondly. I walk through the shop floor, greeting workers, offering a nod here, a word there. It might seem small, but I believe the people who work for me should see the owner, not just hear about him. In the office, Alice, my secretary, is already at her desk. She's been with me for 20 years, never late, always sharp. "Good morning, Mr. Flood," she says with her usual calm tone. I nod back and ask if anything needs urgent attention. She hands me a file from Berkshire Pharmaceuticals. They want brochures, but they're pushing for a 5% discount. I shake my head. Paper prices rose only last month, and I won't let clients nibble away at our profit after a deal is set. Alice doesn't argue. She knows I could bend if I wanted, but she also knows my principles are firm. On my desk sits a photo of Felicity from our 30th anniversary, just 2 years before she passed. She's smiling, holding a bouquet of wildflowers I picked from an empty lot outside of town. I'd given her diamond earrings that day, but it was the flowers that made her eyes shine. That memory keeps me company every morning. At 10 sharp, the door swings open. My grandson Garrett strolls in, late as usual. "Morning, Grandpa," he says, tossing his expensive leather bag onto the chair like it owns the room. He complains about traffic, though in Burley, traffic means maybe 3 cars waiting at a stoplight. I don't bother correcting him. Garrett's been working at the shop for 2 years now, if you can call it that. His title is deputy director, but in reality, he's a weight I carry. That arrangement came from Margaret. After Garrett scraped through college and bounced from one odd job to another, selling electronics here, answering phones there, Margaret begged me to help him. She insisted he deserved a management role to support his young family after marrying Tabitha. Against my better judgment, I gave in. Out of guilt, out of weariness from endless arguments, I agreed. I thought responsibility might shape him into a man. Naive, I know. Instead, Garrett drifts through the office, pretending to be busy while others quietly pick up the slack. Around noon, Margaret calls. "Daddy, you didn't forget Sunday dinner, did you?" Her voice is as tight as ever, like each word costs her. I assure her I haven't. 7 o'clock, Garrett and Tabitha's apartment. She reminds me how hard Tabitha is working to cook. Something special. How much she wants my approval. I don't argue, though I know Tabitha cares little for my opinion. These dinners aren't about family. They're about her putting their success on display. Still, I promise Margaret I'll come. That's easier than listening to her accuse me of indifference again. After work, I stop by the liquor store for a decent bottle of red wine. Not cheap, not extravagant, but good enough for Tabitha to pretend she recognizes the label. She acts. The expert, though she knows as much about wine as I know about ballet. The first time I met her, 3 years ago, I saw right through her polished smile. A tall, slender blonde with cold blue eyes, she studied me as though I were a problem to solve or an obstacle to clear. Her questions that evening cut like little tests. "Is your print shop really a family business, Mr. Flood?" When I told her I built it from the ground up, she smiled politely, replying that print must be a dying trade in the digital world. "Especially for the older generation," she added, in that tone that feels soft, yet sharp. We never liked each other. But Garrett adored her, and Margaret seemed dazzled by the match. 6 months later, they married in a modest ceremony at City Hall, followed by dinner at a small restaurant. I paid for everything, even handed them a generous check. Tabitha accepted it like one accepts loose change. Soon after, they moved into a new apartment on Maple Street, with rent higher than most workers' wages. Garrett was jobless then, but that didn't stop them. That was the moment Margaret began pressing me harder to bring Garrett into my business. Evenings now, I sit in my chair with a book. Lately, it's Dickens's Great Expectations. The title itself feels like a quiet joke, at my expense. As night falls, I catch my reflection in the window, a gray-haired man with weary eyes. Felicity once told me I had the look of a beaten dog, always carrying more than I should. She was right. I close the book, pour myself a single glass of whiskey, just one, every night. Felicity didn't like me drinking, but since she's been gone, it's become my small ritual, not to forget her, but to take the edge off the emptiness. And then Sunday arrives, faster than I want. I wake up heavy-headed, having allowed myself One glass too many the night before. The thought of dinner at Garrett and Tabitha's makes me want to stay in bed, but Margaret would see it as yet another betrayal. I spend the morning in the garden, trimming Felicity's roses, pulling weeds, losing myself in the rhythm of simple work. When I was young, I loved working with my hands. My first press was pieced together by hand from old spare parts. Margaret doesn't remember those days. She only remembers a father too busy to play. By 6 in the evening, I prepare for dinner. I slip into my only proper suit, the dark blue one I bought for Felicity's funeral. A tie would feel too stiff, so I leave it out. The bottle of wine waits by the door, ready to be carried. Garrett and Tabitha live in the New Burley district, about half an hour's walk from my place. I could take a cab, but I prefer to walk. The evening is warm, though clouds are starting to gather above. The city center gives way to tall, identical buildings of glass and concrete, lifeless towers that all look the same, though inside they are sold as modern luxury. It's here that Garrett and Tabitha purchased their apartment last year. A 2-bedroom unit bought with a 25-year mortgage. I had offered to help with the down payment, but Garrett had said no. "We can handle it, Grandpa." I knew that his salary at the print shop would allow him to pay off the loan, but with a very small margin. However, they continue to live large. New furniture, expensive appliances, clothes of famous brands. Either they get into debt or Tabitha has hidden sources of income. The apartment building greets me with the sterile cleanliness of the entrance in the silent elevator. Apartment 16 on the 8th floor. I press the bell and hear a melodic trill. Garrett opens the door. "Hi, Grandpa." He gives me a hug, but it's formal. "Come on in. Mom's here." The hallway smells like spices and perfume. Designer light fixtures, a fancy shoe rack, a full-length mirror, all new, shiny, impersonal Irwin. Margaret is coming out of the living room. "You're just in time." She kisses me on the cheek. She smells of wine. They must have started already. Margaret looks tense as she always does in my presence. I've noticed that she only relaxes when I'm gone. "I brought wine," I say, handing the bottle to Garrett. "Thank you, Grandfather. Tabitha will be pleased. She knows her wines. Of course she does." The living room greets me with semi-darkness and flickering candles. Tabitha likes to create atmosphere. The table is already set white tablecloths, china plates, silverware. It looks more like a restaurant than a family dinner, minus Mr. Flood. Tabitha comes out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Apparently, she'd worn it on purpose to create the caring hostess look. "So nice of you to come." Her smile doesn't reach her eyes. She picks up the bottle I brought, studying the label. "Oh, Chateau Bellevue 2020. Not bad for a, regional wine. The first shot of the evening," I smile back. "Wine store owner recommended it. Great value for money," he says. "Sure." Tabitha sets the bottle on the table. "It's good enough for everyday drinking. Garrett and I have recently discovered Italian wines from the Piedmont region. Amazing bouquet. They are expensive, but the quality is worth the cost." I don't comment. First of all, I don't know enough about wine to argue. Secondly, it's pointless. It's not the wine itself that matters to Tabitha, but the opportunity to demonstrate her sophistication and emphasize my simplicity. We are seated at the table. I'm across from Tabitha, Margaret, and Garrett on either side. Garrett pours wine, not mine, but some of his own already opened. My bottle remains on the edge of the table. "How are things at the print shop, Dad?" Margaret asks, sipping her wine. "Stable," I answer. "Last month, we signed a contract with the fresh foods supermarket chain to print catalogs. Should have enough work for the rest of the year." "Oh, isn't that the chain that opened a new store on Central?" Tabitha perks up. "We were there at the weekend." Such an assortment? "The prices are a bit steep, though. But you have to pay for quality, right? It's not a question, it's a demonstration. I'm even curious. Can they really afford to regularly shop in the most expensive supermarket in Thessaly, or is it just to create an image? Is the print shop keeping up with the orders? Margaret asks. You've had fewer customers lately? Where did you get that from? Citronum. I look at my daughter in surprise. We have a steady stream of orders. Garrett said you've lost some big contracts. I shift my gaze to my grandson. He pretends to be concentrating on his glass. We haven't lost any major contracts in the last year, I say calmly. Perhaps Garrett meant something else. Well, Grandpa, I was talking about those potential clients who haven't signed with us. Garrett replies quickly. Remember Alpha Press. They were never our clients. You met with their representative once and couldn't convince them to work with us. There is an awkward silence. Tabitha casts her husband an irritated glance. Margaret looks at me reproachfully, as if I had deliberately made her son look bad. Dinner is ready, Tabitha announces with feigned cheerfulness, and rises from the table. I'll serve the hot pot. Garrett goes to help his wife. Margaret and I are alone. Why did you do that? She asked quietly. Why? Humiliating Garrett. He's trying. And you're always criticizing him. I was just telling the truth. Your truth isn't always appropriate. I sigh. We've been going in this circle for years. No matter what I say, Margaret will find a way to accuse me of not loving her or Garrett enough. Monday always starts the same way. I leave the house at 7:30, walk down Walnut Street, then turn on to Industrial. The print shop is in an old 2-story red brick building. There used to be a weaving factory here, but in the 90s it went bankrupt, and I bought the premises at a ridiculous price. I spent almost all my savings on renovations and equipment, but it was worth it. Flood's Printing Yard. The sign above the entrance reads, modest but tasteful, like everything I do in life. I go to the door, pull out my keys. Even though we have security, I like to go in first and open the print shop myself. It's a ritual of sorts, a sign that I'm still the boss. Inside, it smells of paper, ink, and machine oil. This smell has become a part of me over 45 years in the printing industry. I turn on the lights, the ventilation systems. Another half hour of silence before the employees start arriving. I go to my office, look through my mail. 3 new orders came in over the weekend. Corporate brochures for a travel firm. Business. Cards for a law firm, and a catalog for a sporting goods store. Not bad. At 8:30, the workers start pulling up. First, as always, comes Alice, my faithful secretary. She is followed by printers, designers, managers. The print shop comes to life, filled with voices and the noise of equipment. Good morning, Mr. Flood? Alice looks into the office. Coffee? Thank you, Alice, and ask Jenkins to come to my office to discuss the fresh foods order. Jenkins is our head printer. He's been with me for 20 years. He's top-notch. You can't find a guy like him these days. Everyone wants to be a manager and a marketer. And working with your hands is considered unworthy. 10 minutes later, Jenkins shows up. A tall, thin man with paint-stained fingers. You wanted me, boss. Yeah, Paul. How's the supermarket order coming along? We should have the first batch of catalogs finished by Wednesday. The quality is excellent. I checked the color proofs myself, but there's a problem with the paper for the second batch. The supplier's late. What does Thomas say? I'm asking about our supplier. He promises to solve it by the end of the week, but I'd be on the safe side. Why don't we go to North Paper? Their prices are higher, but they're more reliable. I nod. I agree. Tell Thomas to order from Nord in case the main supplier fails, and tell Alice to prepare the contract. Jenkins leaves and I go back to my paperwork. At 10 a.m., I get a call from Garrett. Grandpa, I'm going to be late today. Tabitha's not feeling well. I need to take her to the doctor. What's wrong with her? I ask, even though I know it's just another excuse, a migraine or something. I'll be there this afternoon. Okay, I answer calmly. Just don't forget that there's a meeting with Fresh Foods at 2 Calar today. They want to discuss the design of the new series of catalogs. Yes, Yes, I remember. I'll make it. He hangs up and I'm left staring at my phone. Garrett's been working at the print shop for almost 2 years, but he still treats it like a part-time job. He's late. He leaves early. He delegates his tasks to other employees. Yet he gets paid 3 times the average manager's salary, all because he's my grandson. Around 11 talked, I go to the accounting department. It's time to prepare the quarterly reports for the tax authorities. Our accountant, Irma Pettigrew, a woman of 50-odd years, pedantic to the point of impossibility, her desk is a model of order. Papers are stacked, each document in its place. Irma, how are the reports coming along? Almost done, Mr. Flood. Just need to clarify some of last month's expenses. By the way, I wanted to talk to you about the expense side. Is something wrong? Irma adjusts her glasses and looks at me over the thin frames. Not that there is anything wrong. I just noticed the significant difference between the salaries of the senior staff, especially when you consider the amount of work involved. I know exactly what she's talking about. Garrett makes the same per month as a deputy director at a company 10 times our size. I thought we'd discuss this, Irma. Yes, Mr. Flood. But as an accountant, it's my duty to point out misallocation of funds. It could adversely affect the company's long-term financial performance. I acknowledge your concerns, I reply in a formal tone. But we'll leave it at that for now. Irma presses her lips together, but nods. She's too professional to argue, but I can see the judgment in her eyes. And she's right. Damn it. Garrett isn't worth the money he's getting, but cutting his paycheck is going to make Margaret resent me. And I don't have the energy for more conflict with my daughter. I leave accounting with a heavy feeling. On the one hand, I realize I'm spoiling my grandson and indulging his laziness. On the other hand, I still hope that responsibility and good earnings will eventually make a real man out of him. But so far, their salt is the opposite. Garrett is becoming more and more infantile and irresponsible. At 2:00, the clients from Fresh Foods come in, the marketing director and the designer. Garrett's not there, of course. I have to run the meeting myself, even though it was originally his job. Fortunately, I am well versed in every aspect of my business and can easily replace any member of staff. The clients are happy with the results of the discussion. We agree on a design concept and deadlines. As they leave, I call Garrett. Where are you? The meeting with Fresh Foods is over. I'm sorry, Grandpa. There's no remorse in his voice. Lingering at the doctor's office, Tabitha then asked to be taken to her parents' house. She's still not feeling well. Garrett, that was an important meeting. We were discussing the design for the new catalog series, which is your project. Well, you did well, didn't you? There's a hint of irritation in his voice. What would I have done there? You still have the last word? It's not about the last word. You're the deputy director. It's your responsibility to deal with key accounts. Okay, Grandpa. I'm sorry. I'll be there tomorrow. I've got another line. I'll call you back. He hangs up without waiting for my answer. I clench the receiver so that my knuckles turn white. I inhale deeply, trying to calm myself. Garrett's always had a way of pissing me off ever since I was a kid. Maybe it's because he reminds me of Margaret when she was younger, just as selfish and irresponsible. At the end of the day, I walk home as usual. As I pass a car dealership on Main Street, I notice a familiar figure, Garrett. He's standing next to a brand-new red sports car, talking to the salesman. Judging by his gestures and smile, they're discussing the purchase. I stop in the shade of a tree watching. Garrett walks around the car, gets behind the wheel, starts the engine. Even from here, I can hear the engine roar. Not long ago, he had a used sedan. Decent enough, but not luxurious. Apparently, he decided to upgrade his fleet. But a car like that costs at least a year's salary for a middle manager. Even with the salary I'm paying Garrett, that's a big purchase. Either they saved up, which is unlikely given their lifestyle, or they took out a loan. There's an empty apartment waiting for me at home and a dinner of last night's reheated lasagna. After Felicity died, I never learned to cook anything more complicated than scrambled eggs. Sometimes I order takeout, sometimes I buy convenience foods. Margaret offered to hire a housekeeper, but I declined. I didn't like having strangers in the house. I sit in an armchair with a glass of whiskey and a book, but I can't concentrate on reading. My thoughts go back to Garrett and his new car, then to the conversation with Irma about paychecks, to my grandson's empty promises, Tabitha's cold arrogance, Margaret's constant rebuke. How was it that I, who had lived a life of conscience, was surrounded by people who saw me only as a source of money and privilege? Felicity always said I spoiled Margaret too much. Perhaps she was right. But since her death, it's gotten worse. Now, there's no one to restrain my impulses to make it up to my daughter with material goods. The phone is ringing. Margaret. Daddy, have you heard the news yet? Her voice sounds excited. What news? Garrett and Tabitha are buying a new car. Can you believe it? A Ferrari. Garrett's been wanting one for years. A Ferrari? That toy costs a fortune. Even a used model is at least $100,000. Can they afford it? I asked cautiously. Of course they can. Garrett says the print shop is doing great and you promised him a promotion. Besides, Tabitha is making good money too. I'm silent, digesting the information. First off all, I didn't promise Garrett anything. Second, Tabitha works in human resources at the local factory. It's not like her salary allows her to buy sports cars. Margaret. I didn't promise Garrett anything. And the print shop is doing well, but not well enough to buy a Ferrari. But her voice is changing. Garrett said, Garrett lied either to you or to me or to both of us. You always do this. There's anger in her voice now. Always thinking the worst about Garrett. Why can't you just be happy for your grandson? Because I know where he gets his money from. My pocket, and he didn't earn that money. You gave him that salary and now you're accusing him of spending his own money. I gave him that salary in the hope that he'd do a proper job. But he's always late, misses important meetings, shifts his responsibilities to others. You're exaggerating. Garrett is trying very hard. This conversation is pointless. Margaret is always protective of her son, no matter what he does. To her, he's the perfect child, and all his problems stem from my lack of love and support. All right, Margaret, I won't argue. Tell Garrett congratulations on the purchase. You could have called him yourself. I will. I lie. It's just a lot of work right now. After talking to my daughter, I'm in a bad mood. I pour myself another whiskey, my second glass of whiskey this evening, which is rare for me. Felicity wouldn't approve, but Felicity's gone, and I'm too tired to fight with my own family. The next day, Garrett arrives at work in a new car, red, shiny. It looks flashy in the modest parking lot of the print shop. Employees gather around admiring it, congratulating it. Garrett glows with pride, showing off the interior, bragging about the engine's power. I watch from my office window, feeling a growing irritation. When my grandson finally walks in, I ask him bluntly, "How much did the car cost?" $11,120,000, he answers proudly. But I took it on credit, so don't worry. Fine, Ann. What was the monthly payment? About $3,000, but Tabitha and I have it all figured out so we can manage. $3,000 is almost half his salary, and they've got a mortgage. Garrett, are you sure this is the right thing to do? You're already in debt on your apartment. Grandpa, don't start. He rolls his eyes. I'm a grown man, and I can decide what I want to spend my money on. Your money? I can't take it anymore. Garrett, let's be honest. You're making 3 times your actual value as an employee just because you're my grandson. His face is getting darker. Is that what you think? That I'm worthless? I think you could be worth a lot more if you put in some effort. But you'd rather be late, miss important meetings, and delegate your work to others. I work hard, and his voice rises. You just don't see it all at once. I'm networking, talking to potential clients. You do? Name one new client you've brought on in the last 6 months. Garrett opens his mouth but says nothing. Then he frowns. You know what, Grandpa? If you're not happy with my work, you can fire me, but don't tell me how to spend my money. With these words, he leaves the office, slamming the door loudly. I'm left alone, feeling the vein on my temple throbbing. Garrett's right about one thing. I can fire him, or at least reduce his salary to a reasonable level. But then what? A scandal with Margaret, accusations of callousness, of not loving his own family, and then there's Garrett and Tabitha's bankruptcy because they're clearly living beyond their means. Thursday, I look at the quarterly financials. Irma did a great job. Everything is clear, detailed with charts and projections. One of the tables catches my eye, a comparison of executive salaries with the market average. I already knew I was overpaying Garrett, but seeing it in numbers is especially frustrating. His monthly salary is 5 times the average salary for a similar position at Burley. 5 times. In effect, I'm sponsoring his beautiful life with Tabitha. Car, apartment, expensive clothes, restaurants, and what do I get in return? Neglect, tardiness, unfulfilled obligations, and arrogant looks from my sister-in-law who thinks I'm a loser. In the afternoon, Alice comes in minus Mr. Flood. Mrs. Tabitha called for you. She wanted me to tell you that Garrett won't be coming in today. She looks in her notebook. Has an important business meeting in another city. Thank you, Alice. I nod. When the receptionist leaves, I dial Garrett's number. The phone is disconnected. I call Margaret. Do you know where Garrett is? I ask without preamble. He and Tabitha went to the capital for the weekend. It's their wedding anniversary, remember? No, I haven't forgotten. But it's only Thursday and their anniversary is Saturday. He should be at work, Margaret. We have an important project. Dad, it's just one day. Can't you let your grandson celebrate his wedding anniversary? On the weekend? Yes. On a workday, no. Don't you think you're being a little hard on him? Garrett works hard enough as it is. I'm cutting the conversation short, citing urgent business. There's no point in explaining to Margaret that her son is a slacker on an undeservedly high salary. She wouldn't believe it anyway. In the evening, at home, I surf social media, a rare thing for me. Tabitha has a public profile. I scroll through the photos. Luxurious restaurants, vacations at sea, designer clothes. Here's a photo from a car dealership with a new car. The caption, "When your husband is a successful businessman, life is beautiful. Success. Shocks. Luxury is Shocks Ferrari. A successful businessman." Garrett. I feel a wave of anger rising inside. All my grandson has accomplished is being born into my family. I've given him a job most people can only dream of. I pay him several times more than he deserves, and he and his wife are billing it as their own accomplishment while treating me as a failure. In the next photo, Tabitha poses in front of their apartment after the renovation. Designer furniture, crystal chandeliers, marble countertops. The caption reads, "Finally finished renovating. Now our house matches our status." Luxury. Canary design status. Their status. What is their status other than grandson of a rich grandfather? I close my laptop, feeling the vein on my temple throb. Anger mixes with frustration and bitterness. I built a business from the ground up, worked 16 hours a day, took risks, put every dime I earned back into the business, and now my grandson and his wife are reaping the fruits of my labor without even bothering to say thank you, Felicity warned me. "Don't spoil Margaret," she said. "She'll grow up selfish." I didn't listen. And then Margaret raised an equally selfish child, Garrett. And now I have to reap the rewards of my weakness. I'm pouring myself a whiskey third glass tonight. An unacceptable luxury. Felicity wouldn't approve, but she's not around. And my irritation needs an outlet. I've let my family take advantage of my kindness for too long. Perhaps it's time for a change. Sunday was overcast. Heavy clouds hung over Burley, promising rain by evening. I stood at the window, watching the wind ruffle the branches of the old maple tree in the garden. Felicity's roses wilted in the breeze as if anticipating the weather. Maybe it wasn't the weather, though, but my mood, dark and heavy. Tonight, is dinner at Garrett and Tabitha's, a monthly ritual I've tolerated for the sake of family peace. But after what I'd learned this week, the thought of meeting them was only irritating. I still couldn't believe their insolence, living large on my dime while making themselves look like successful people who'd achieved everything on their own. Margaret called in the morning, reminding me about dinner. "Don't be late, Dad, and be nice to Tabitha. She's trying so hard." I just hummed in response. Trying is not Tabitha. She's not trying to be a good wife, a good daughter-in-law, or a good person. She tries to give the appearance of success and prosperity, behind which lies emptiness and greed. Toward evening, I packed up and left the house. In my hands is a bottle of wine, inexpensive, but decent. I know Tabitha will cringe when she sees the label, but it's become part of our game. She pretends to know about wine. I pretend not to notice her disdain. It was drizzling a fine rain. I opened my umbrella. Old, shabby, but reliable, like everything in my life. Burley seemed extinct on a Sunday evening. The few passers-by hurried to get away from the weather. The stores were closed. The streets were empty. Only in the windows of the high-rise buildings was a warm light on, reminding me of the family evenings people spend together. I'd had such evenings once with Felicity and little Margaret. Everything seemed simple and straightforward then. The neighborhood where Garrett and Tabitha lived was a series of new glass and concrete high-rises. Modern architecture, pretending to be elegant, but to my taste, impersonal and cold. However, mostly young people working in the capital settled here. For them, the prestige of the address was more important than the coziness of the house. I took the elevator to the 8th floor and rang the doorbell of apartment 16. Tabitha opened the door, her makeup impeccable, her designer dress. I recognized the label, though I didn't know much about fashion, her smile unaffected by her eyes. "Minus Mr. Flood." "Good evening." She stepped back, letting me into the apartment. "Come in, everyone is already in the living room." I handed her a bottle of wine and I said, "Here," so I wouldn't come empty-handed. She took the bottle with 2 fingers, as if it were something unpleasant. "Oh, that's nice. I think this will go with the salad. We have a special wine for the main course tonight, a Chateau Margaux, a 2,000-year-old. Garrett brought it back from the capital. I smiled without commenting. A 2,000-year-old Chateau Margaux costs at least $600. Another display of success at my expense. Margaret and Garrett met me in the living room. The daughter looked tense as she always did in my presence. Garrett was smug and relaxed. He was wearing a new suit, obviously expensive, and a watch I'd never seen before. It was solid gold, the kind worn by the nouveau riche to show off their wealth. "Hello, grandfather." Garrett shook my hand. "We're glad you could make it." "I never miss a family dinner," I said. "Come and sit down," Margaret pointed to a chair. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine." I sat down looking around the living room. It had changed a lot since my last visit. There was new furniture, a leather sofa, a glass coffee table, and expensive framed paintings on the walls. On the shelves were decorative knickknacks that I'm sure cost a lot of money. Everything screamed the desire to demonstrate status and wealth. "Do you like our new interior?" Tabitha asked, entering the living room with glasses on a tray. "We finally finished the renovation. It took the designer almost 3 months. It looks expensive," I said. "You can't skimp on quality," she smiled. "Garrett and I think a house should reflect the status of its owners." "And what is your status?" I asked bluntly. Tabitha froze for a moment, then laughed too loudly, too playfully. "Well, Garrett's in charge of the business, and I'm not the last person in the company. We can afford some luxuries. Garrett runs the business. That's what you call the deputy director of the family printing company, thanks to Grandpa." "By the way, Dad," Margaret interjected, feeling the tension, "have you seen Garrett's new car?" "It's a real Ferrari." "I've seen it." I nodded. "Impressive, especially the price." "A car is an investment," Garrett said importantly. Besides, in my position, it's important to make the right impression on my clients. And how many clients have you impressed in the last month? I asked. Daddy, Margaret exclaimed. Why are you starting this? It's okay, Mom. Garrett held up his hand. Grandpa's just worried about business, but he has nothing to worry about. I'm working on some big contracts. Really? I raised an eyebrow. What kind of contracts? That's confidential information at this stage, he answered evasively, but you'll find out soon enough. Tabitha poured the wine into glasses. She left my humble one untouched. Let's drink to success, she suggested, raising her glass. To everything. We've achieved and everything we'll achieve. We drank. The wine was really excellent, tart with a rich aftertaste. You couldn't buy a bottle like this in a regular store. I wondered how much of my money had gone into this display of status. Dinner's almost ready, Tabitha said. I made piecing duck. The chef at the Golden Dragon gave me the recipe. It's a new restaurant in the capital. Very exclusive. Garrett and I were there last week, and you have to make reservations a month in advance. Sounds impressive, I said. I didn't know you were into cooking. Oh, it's a recent hobby, she said with a wave of her hand. Since my promotion, I've had more free time. You got promoted? I didn't know that. Yes, I'm the head of human resources now. Tabitha straightened up, clearly proud of herself. The youngest manager in the history of the company. Congratulations, I nodded. Is that a significant salary increase? Daddy? Margaret intervened again. That's not a fair question. It's all right. Tabitha smiled. Yes, Mr. Flood. I make enough now that Garrett and I can afford the lifestyle we're to serve. I didn't say anything. My experience told me that even a human resources manager in a provincial factory couldn't earn enough to buy a Ferrari and designer furniture. Either Tabitha's exaggerating her income or she and Garrett are up to their eyeballs in debt. Let's go to the table, Tabitha suggested. Everything's ready. The dining room was as impressive as the living room. A huge dark wood table, high-backed chairs, a crystal chandelier, silverware. On the table were china plates, fine glass goblets, linen napkins. Everything looked like an expensive restaurant or the home of an old aristocracy, but without soul or history bought recently to impress. We sat down at the table. Tabitha started serving the entree. Exotic fruit salad, lobster soup, and finally Peking duck. The food was really good, though too fancy for my taste. I preferred the simple dishes Felicity made. Beef stew, mashed potatoes, apple pie. How did you like the duck, Papa? Margaret asked. It's good, I answered honestly. Tabitha, you really are a good cook. Thank you, Mr. Flood. She smiled. Although, of course, it doesn't compare to restaurant food. Do you go to restaurants? Rarely, I answered. I prefer home-cooked food. Of course, it's hard to change habits at your age, she nodded understandingly. Besides, restaurants are so expensive. Now, not everyone can afford it. Another jab. Tabitha was clearly referring to my poverty compared to their luxurious life. It's not about money, I replied calmly. I just don't see the point in overpaying for atmosphere. Food is food, no matter where it's served. Oh, but atmosphere is so important, Tabitha exclaimed. The right ambiances can turn an ordinary meal into a real experience. That's why we've invested so much in the interior of the dining room. Although, of course, for those who are used to eating in the kitchen, it might seem excessive. I remained silent, though I was seething inside. Yes, I was. Eating in the kitchen in my house, which was fully paid for, unlike their apartment with a 25-year mortgage. I was eating simple food because I was used to it, not because I couldn't afford a restaurant. By the way, Grandpa Garrett poured me some wine. How do you like the wine? It's a special year, 2000. It's worth a lot of money, but it's good for special occasions. It's good wine. I nodded. But admittedly, I'm not a great connoisseur. For me, wine is wine. Oh, no, no. Tabitha shook her head. There's a huge difference between ordinary table wine and real aged wine. It's like, she thought for a moment, like the difference between success and failure. One is bright and memorable, the other gray and mediocre. Which category do you put me in? I asked her directly, looking her in the eye. There was silence at the table. Margaret turned pale. Garrett frowned. Tabitha looked confused for a moment, but quickly pulled herself together. I was talking about wine, Mr. Flood, not people, she said with a strange smile. Shauna, but you're drawing a parallel between wine and people. I didn't back down. So, which category do you put me in? Bright and memorable or gray and mediocre? Dad, please, Margaret intervened. Let's not spoil the evening. I'm just asking Tabitha's opinion, I said calmly. She obviously wanted to give it, so why not give it to me straight? Tabitha sipped her wine, then set it down and looked at me with ill-concealed superiority. If you insist, Mr. Flood, I believe you could have accomplished so much more in life. You had potential, but you limited yourself. Small town, small business, small ambition. You settled for little when you could have had so much. Tabitha, Garrett exclaimed. What are you saying? He asked. She shrugged. And I was only giving my opinion. Mr. Flood, he's a grown man. He can take criticism. Go on, I encouraged her. What else do you think of me? Well, Tabitha drew in a breath, apparently determined to go all the way. I think you're stuck in the past. The world is changing. There are new opportunities, but you cling to your old habits, your old ways of doing business. You could expand your print shop, open branches in other cities, start an internet business, but instead you keep printing business cards and booklets in your small office. That's... She paused, searching for a word. It's a little sad. Dad built the business from the ground up, Margaret reminded her. He provided for our family, gave me an education. Of course, and that's respectable. Tabitha nodded. But we're talking about potential. What could have been? Right now, looking at Mr. Flood, no one would say he's a successful businessman. Old house, old car, old clothes. Even this bottle of wine he brought. She nodded at my untouched bottle. Speaks of a man who is used to saving money and making do with little. I was silent, letting her talk. With each word, Tabitha grew more confident, more sarcastic. Years of held contempt had finally found its way out. You know, Mr. R. Flood, she went on, when I first met Garrett, he told me about his businessman, grandfather. I envisioned a successful man with scope, with vision. And then I saw, she paused. I'm sorry, Toby Blunt, but I saw a man resigned to mediocrity. And I felt sorry for Garrett. It's hard to aspire to more with such an example in front of you. Tabitha, stop! Garrett put his hand on her shoulder. You're overreacting. No, let her keep going. I held up my hand. I'm interested to hear what else your wife thinks of me. Tabitha leaned back in her chair, looking at me with undisguised superiority. I just think everyone should strive for the maximum to live life, to the fullest, to not limit oneself. You could have traveled, discovered new horizons, enjoyed life. Instead, you've locked yourself in four walls with books and memories. That's a loser's choice, Mr. Flood. This is it. The word has been spoken. Loser? Margaret gasped. Garrett went pale, but Tabitha didn't stop. Pardon the abruptness, but someone has to tell you this. You're stuck in the past, clinging to memories of your wife, your old business, your old habits. All the while, life is passing you by. How does it feel to be a loser, Mr. Flood? To watch the younger generation overtake you, achieve what you could only dream of? There was dead silence in the room. Even Margaret, always ready to defend anyone but me, seemed shocked. Garrett stared down at his plate, avoiding my gaze. I sipped my wine slowly, set my glass down, and smiled quietly without anger. That's a good question, Tabitha. But you know what the best part is? It never felt like a failure. I had my own business that I built from the ground up. I had a wife I loved with whom we lived a happy life. There is a daughter and a grandson whom I supported always, even when they didn't deserve it. I never chased luxury because it was never a measure of success for me. I paused, looking Tabitha straight in the eye. But while we're on the subject of success and failure, let me ask you a counter-question. How does it feel to find out that this loser won't be paying your bills anymore? Tabitha blinked, not understanding. What do you mean? I mean that all your boasted welfare is my money, I answered calmly. Garrett gets a salary that is 5 times his real value as an employee. I know the value of his success. It's my generosity and my weakness. I have allowed you to take advantage of my kindness and look down on me for too long. Papa, Margaret exclaimed, what are you saying? The truth, Margaret. It's time we all heard the truth. Garrett is a mediocre worker who only got his job by being related to me, and I'm tired of his irresponsibility and ingratitude. Grandfather, you can't say that. Garrett finally looked up at me. I work as hard as anyone else. Don't lie now. I shook my head. You're late. You miss important meetings. You shift your responsibilities to others. And then you go out and buy a Ferrari with the money. I pay you, not for your work, but because you're my grandson. Tabitha straightened, her face pale. Are you saying you're going to fire Garrett? You don't have to fire him. It's enough to bring his salary in line with his real value as an employee. I think a 5-fold reduction would be fair. 5 times, and Garrett jumped out of his chair. You can't do that. We have a mortgage, a car loan. That's your problem. I shrugged. You've made commitments you can't fulfill without my help. Maybe it's time you learn to live within your means. Dad, you can't do that to your own grandson. Margaret grabbed my arm. Think of the consequences. I've been thinking about this all week, Margaret, and I've come to the conclusion that to continue, to sponsor their lifestyle is to encourage ingratitude and arrogance. If Garrett wants a Ferrari and designer furniture, let him earn it himself. But you realize they won't be able to pay off the loans with a regular salary? Margaret insisted. So? We'll have to sell something? I shrugged. Maybe start with the Ferrari? Tabitha looked at me hatefully. You can't do this to us. This is blackmail. No, Tabitha. It's business. I smiled. You appreciate successful businessmen, don't you? Well, a successful businessman doesn't pay an employee more than he's worth. And by the way, I got up from the table. Thank you for your candor. You're right. I've been living in the past too long. It's time to move on. I'll start by stopping subsidizing ungrateful relatives. Dad, don't go. Margaret jumped up. Let's discuss this calmly. We've already discussed it. I headed for the exit. The duck was delicious, Tabitha. Too bad your culinary talents aren't matched by good manners. I left the apartment without looking back. I could hear Margaret and Tabitha's indignant voices behind me, but I didn't care anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt surprisingly light. It was as if I'd lifted a heavy weight from my shoulders that I'd been carrying for years. The rain intensified, but I didn't open my umbrella. The cool drops on my face were refreshing, washing away the accumulated irritation. I walked through the deserted streets of Betrayal for the first time in a long time. I felt not like a loser, but like a man who had finally made the right decision. Monday morning was surprisingly clear. The overnight rain had cleared, leaving behind clear skies and fresh air. I woke up earlier than usual, around 5 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. Thoughts of last night's dinner and the decision I'd made kept me awake. Not that I doubted my rightness. No. For the first time in a long time, I was absolutely sure of what I was doing. But it was going to be a hard day, and I was mentally preparing myself for it. I got up, showered, shaved, breakfast as usual, oatmeal, and tea. The familiar ritual calmed me down, gave me back a sense of control over the situation. At 6:30, I was ready, though I usually didn't leave the house until 7:30. I decided to spend an extra hour for a walk. I needed to clear my head. By 8 in the morning, I was at the printing house. As usual, I arrived first, opened the door with my own key. The smell of paint and paper, so familiar and native, filled my lungs. 45 years in printing, almost my entire conscious life. I created this business from scratch, raised it like a child, and I won't let my own grandson treat it like a cash cow. The first thing I did in the office was call Irma, our accountant. She was already at her desk as usual. Irma, good morning. Would you come in here, please? We need to discuss a change in the payroll. Certainly, Mr. Flood, she replied. I'll be there in 5 minutes. Irma showed up exactly as scheduled, meticulous as ever. She sat down across from him and took out a notebook and pen. Go ahead, Mr. Flood. Irma, do you remember our conversation about Garrett's salary? She nodded, showing no emotion, though I'm sure she was inwardly elated that I'd finally listened to reason. As of today, his salary will be reduced to a level commensurate with his qualifications and the amount of work he does, say $2,000 a month instead of the current $10,000. I see. Irma made a note in her notebook. Does this take effect immediately? Yes, from the next paycheck. And also, I hesitated, please prepare a full report on salary expenses for the last 2 years, itemized for each employee. Will do. Irma nodded. Anything else? No, that's all. Thank you. When Irma left, I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath. The first step had been taken. Now came the hard part, talking to Garrett. He showed up at the print shop around 11 later than usual, but still earlier than I'd expected after yesterday. He'd had a sleepless night, judging by the circles under his eyes and his bruised appearance. No wonder the sudden realization that your luxurious life might be coming to an abrupt end could make anyone sleepless. Garrett knocked hesitantly on my office door. May I? His voice sounded unusually quiet. Come in. I pointed to the chair across the hall. Sit down. He sat down, nervously rubbing the cuff of his shirt. Grandfather, about last night. Tabitha didn't mean to offend you. She'd had too much wine and said too much. Tabitha said exactly what she thought. I said calmly, and I'm grateful for her honesty. It's about time we set the record straight. Look, Garrett stepped forward. I understand that you're upset, but don't make any rash decisions out of emotion. Let's talk about this like adults. I already did. With Irma, I looked him straight in the eye. Your salary will be reduced to $2,000 a month, starting with your next paycheck. Garrett turned pale. You can't do that. We have obligations, loans. I can and I do, I was adamant. $2,000 is more than generous considering your contribution to the print shop. But we can't survive on that amount. I could hear the desperation in his voice. Just the mortgage payment. $3,000 a month plus the car loan. Sell the car, I suggested. A brand new Ferrari should bring good money, enough to pay off the loan and maybe even have enough left over for a used but decent car. Are you kidding me? Garrett jumped up from his chair. You want me to sell my dream car? I want you to live within your means. If you can't make money on a Ferrari, don't buy one. This is all about Tabitha, isn't it? Garrett was running around the office. Are you getting back at her for what you said last night? No. It's not revenge. It's a business decision that's long overdue. I'm paying you 5 times your real value as an employee. It's unwise from a business standpoint. But I'm your grandson, he exclaimed. Isn't family more important than business? It's because you're my grandson that I put up with your irresponsibility for so long, I replied. Any other employee with your attitude would have been fired a long time ago. Garrett sat back down, covering his face with his hands. When he looked up again, his eyes were a mixture of despair and anger. What am I going to tell Tabitha? He asked quietly. She wouldn't understand. Tell her the truth that you've been living off me all these years not on your own merit. She'll hate me, Garrett whispered. If her love is based only on your ability to provide a life of luxury, then perhaps that love isn't worth their grit, I said. Garrett looked up sharply, fury in his eyes. Easy for you, Tosei. You're old and lonely and have nothing to lose. I have my whole life ahead of me, and you're ruining it. I'm not ruining your life, Garrett. I'm giving you a chance to build it on a real foundation, not an illusion. What hypocrisy! He jumped up again. All your life, you've spent your whole life telling your mother you didn't pay enough attention to her because of business. And now you put that same business above the welfare of your grandson. I'm not putting business before you. I just want you to grow up and take responsibility for your decisions. Garrett ran out of the office, slamming the door so hard the glass shook. A few minutes later, I heard the roar of his Ferrari, driving away before he'd even worked an hour. Typical of him. Around 2 hours in the afternoon, Margaret called. I knew. It was inevitable. Garrett would probably rush right over to complain to his mom. "What have you done?" she started without greeting. "Garrett is desperate." "Hello, Margaret," I replied calmly. I did what I should have done a long time ago. I stopped indulging in irresponsibility and dependency. You're ruining your own grandson's life. Tears were ringing in her voice. She and Tabitha won't be able to pay their loans. They'll have to sell the apartment, the car. Maybe they should have thought of that before taking out loans they can't afford, I said. You're doing this out of spite? Margaret was already yelling, taking revenge on me for some old grudge through my son. I'm not doing anything out of spite, Margaret. I just stopped sponsoring a lifestyle that Garrett and Tabitha can't afford. Dad, I'm begging you. Her voice changed to a pleading one. Think again. At least give them time to prepare, to find some extra income. I'm giving Garrett a job with decent pay. If he needs more, he can look for a second job or upgrade his skills. But I will no longer pay him 5 times what he deserves. You never really loved us, Arnhem. Margaret turned to shouting again. Not me, not Garrett. Your business has always been more important than your family. That's not true, Margaret. I tried to remain calm. I've always loved you, and I still do. And Garrett, too. That's why I can't let him live in illusions anymore. If Mom were alive, she would never have let you do this. That was a low blow. Margaret knew how much I missed Felicity and used that against me. But this time, I didn't succumb to the manipulation. If Mom were alive, Garrett would never have become so spoiled and irresponsible, I answered firmly. She wouldn't have let you turn him into a perpetual child who thinks the world owes him something. Margaret hung up the phone. I knew she'd call back. She always did after our fights. But this time, I wasn't going to back down. On Thursday, I overheard Garrett's phone conversation with Tabitha. No, honey, I can't leave early, he said. I have a meeting with a client at 5. Yes, I realize you wanted to go to the restaurant, but we're going to have to postpone. No, Grandpa won't change his mind. I've already tried it. Yes, 2,000 and not a cent more. Friday night when I was about to go home, there was a knock on my office door. It was Irma, our accountant. Minus Mr. Flood, you asked for the payroll report for the last 2 years. It's ready. Thank you, Irma. I took the file. Have a good weekend. You too. She paused in the doorway. By the way, I've noticed that Garrett's been much more responsible these days. He even helped me sort through my paperwork yesterday. Yeah, I've noticed that too. I nodded. We'll see how long he lasts. Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Margaret stood on the doorstep, pale and puffy. May I come in? She asked quietly. Of course. I stepped back, letting her in. Would you like some tea? Yes, please. We went into the kitchen. I put the kettle on, took out the cups. Margaret sat down at the table, fidgeting nervously with the strap of her purse. Dad, I came to talk to you about Garrett and Tabitha. I'm listening. Are you really not going to change your mind? She looked at me hopefully. They're in a desperate situation. Margaret? I sat down across from her. Garrett was paid an undeservedly high salary for 2 years. That should have been enough to create a safety cushion, but they chose to spend it all on luxury and pomp and circumstance. They're young, inexperienced. Garrett is 28, Tabitha is 26. They're not teenagers, Margaret. It's time they took responsibility for their decisions. But they're your family, she exclaimed. Aren't you supposed to help in times of need? I am, I answered calmly. Garrett still works at the print shop and earns a decent salary. That's more than most people can say for their relatives. Tabitha left. Him, Margaret said suddenly, looking down at the table. Last night, packed her things, and went to her parents' house. I couldn't say I was surprised, but the news still stung. I'm sorry, I said sincerely, but if she left because of the money, then maybe their relationship was built on the wrong foundation from the beginning. She said she couldn't live with a man who couldn't provide a decent standard of living. Margaret looked up at me. Here he's full of tears. Garrett is broken. He loves her. Does she love him? I asked. Or the lifestyle he could provide for her at my expense? You've always been cynical. Margaret shook her head. Not everyone measures relationships by money. Tabitha seems to do just that, I said. Why else would she have left now and not when Garrett was making a few odd jobs before the print shop? Margaret didn't answer. The kettle boiled and I poured tea for us. We sat in silence for a while. What will happen to Garrett now? I asked at last. I don't know, Margaret sighed. He's in such a state. I'm afraid to leave him alone. He could move in with you for a while, I suggested. He already has, she nodded. But that won't solve his financial problems. He still has to pay off his loans. Let him sell the car and the apartment, I repeated my advice. It's the only way out. It was a week after my conversation with Margaret. A week that changed a lot of things. Most of all, my attitude to my own life. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders that I had been carrying, without realizing it. Tuesday morning was cool but sunny. I woke up at 6 as usual, but instead of getting ready for work, I decided to lie in bed. Just lay there looking up at the ceiling and enjoying the silence. Strangely, the simple act of inactivity brought me more pleasure than anything I'd done in months. I got up at 7, showered, and shaved. I decided to change my breakfast from the usual oatmeal and fried myself some scrambled eggs and bacon. Felicity always said that I was too much into healthy eating, forgetting about the little pleasures of life. Maybe she was right. On the way to the print store, for the first time in a long time, I paid attention to the store windows, to the passers-by, to the flowers in the front gardens. The world around me suddenly took on colors and smells, as if I had woken up from a long sleep. Everything went on as usual at the print shop. Garrett was on time, doing his work without reminders, even taking initiative. His face was gaunt, his eyes shadowed. But there was a new determination in his gaze. We hardly spoke at all, only on work-related matters. He's still resentful, and I understand. But the resentment will pass, and the lesson, I hope, will remain. I learned from Alice that Garrett had found a part-time job working at a call center in the evenings. He'd also sold his Ferrari, but as I suspected, he owed the bank. The car was valued at $90,000 and the loan was for $110,000. The difference would take several more years to pay off. The situation with the apartment was even worse. Tabitha categorically refused to sign the documents for the sale, and she didn't pay her part of the mortgage. It was all on Garrett's shoulders, $3,000 a month for a place he didn't even live in. He'd moved in with Margaret, but with his current salary of $2,000 from me and apparently another $2,000 from his part-time job, it was almost impossible to pay the mortgage. Margaret had called me several times trying to be sympathetic. They could lose the apartment. Garrett is working his ass off. Tabitha is threatening to sue for not paying the mortgage. I listened, but remained adamant. I wasn't going to indulge their irresponsibility again. Sometimes you have to go through hardship to learn to live within your means. On Friday night, after closing all work matters, I decided to take a walk around the city just for fun with no purpose. Burley is a small city. You can get around it in a couple of hours, but I suddenly realized that I hadn't been to many of its corners for a long time. Work, home, homework, occasional family dinners at Garrett and Tabitha's. It was as if I had voluntarily caged myself in a cage of routine and obligation. I walked down the streets, breathing in the spring air, and thought about how much I'd missed, out on over the years. After Felicity's death, it was as if life had lost its colors and I hadn't noticed. Immersed in work, in worries about the business, about Margaret, about Garrett. I forgot about myself. My feet led me to an old park on the outskirts of Burley. Felicity and I used to walk there, sitting on the bench by the pond, feeding the ducks. Now the park looked abandoned. Overgrown paths, peeling paint on the benches, trash on the pond. It was a sad sight. I sat down on a bench, the same one where we liked to sit with Felicity. Strangely, the memories didn't evoke the usual wisefulness, more like warm nostalgia and gratitude. Gratitude that I had the good fortune to live with this amazing woman for 35 years, minus Mr. Flood. A voice behind me made me "W's." I'm sorry. I didn't mean to startle you. I turned around. Standing in front of me was a woman in her 60s, wearing an elegant, light-colored coat and neatly coiffed hair. Her face looked familiar, but I couldn't remember where we'd met. Ellen or Parker, she introduced herself, noticing my confusion. We live on the same street. I sometimes help you with your roses. Of course, Mrs. Parker, I said, embarrassed. I'm sorry. I was thinking. Call me Eleanor. She smiled. May I sit down? Of course, Mrs. Parker. Eleanor sat down next to me, placing a small purse on her lap. I didn't expect to see you here, she said. You're usually so busy with work. I thought I'd take a walk to stretch my legs, I said. Do you come to this park often? Almost every day. I walk, Buster. She pointed to a poodle sniffing the bushes nearby. He loves this place. We got to talking. It turned out Eleanor was a widow like me. Her husband died 4 years ago of a heart attack. She worked as a teacher at the local school, now retired. Her 2 grown-up children live in the capital and sometimes come to visit with their grandchildren. Ashim, for the first year. After George's death, I hardly left the house, she confessed. Everything seemed pointless. And then I suddenly realized that life goes on and that George would never want me to spend the rest of my life in mourning. I nodded, recognizing my own thoughts in her words. It took me longer to realize that, I said. It's been 5 years since Felicity was gone, and I'm still living in a fog. But something has changed, hasn't it? Eleanor looked at me shrewdly. Otherwise, you wouldn't be sitting here right now. Yes, you're right. Yeah, made a big decision the other day. Something about not living in the past anymore. We talked till dusk. For the first time in a long time, I felt at ease talking to another person. Ella Lonner turned out to be an intelligent, well-read woman with a subtle sense of humor. As it began to get dark, she got up. I have to go, Buster's cold, she said. It was nice talking to you, Mr. Flood. Irwin, I corrected her. Call me Irwin. Okay, Irwin, she smiled. Maybe you'd like to have dinner together sometime. I'm pretty good at roasts. I felt the blood rush to my cheeks. It felt strange for a man my age. I'd love to, I said. How about next Friday, 7 She suggested it. I live at number 23 Oraova. I'll look forward to it. I went home in high spirits, as if something new and bright had appeared on the horizon. Not a replacement for Felicity. No, that's impossible. But perhaps a new page in my life. Over the weekend, I tackled the house. How many years had it been since I'd last redecorated? 5-10. The walls needed painting. The floors needed sanding. The furniture needed updating. I decided to start small with the kitchen. I bought paint, brushes, rollers, protective film. The work turned out to be therapeutic. The mechanical movements were soothing and the visible result was satisfying. By Sunday evening, the kitchen was transformed. Fresh, creamy walls instead of the yellowed walls, new curtains on the windows, clean, shiny surfaces. A small change, but it was like breathing new life into the house. I had a surprise waiting for me at work on Monday. Garrett came into my office with a folder of papers. "Grandpa, I wanted to show you a new project," he said without his usual swagger. "I've developed a proposal for the Golden Horseshoe restaurant chain. They want to update menus, business cards, advertising materials. It's a pretty big order." I went through the documents he prepared. Everything was done professionally. Calculations, proposals, layouts. It was the first time Garrett had really put effort into his work. "Not bad," I said, setting the papers aside. "When's the meeting with them?" "Tomorrow at 10 Abre. I was thinking maybe you could come with me. They're a reputable company and your credibility would help." I shook my head. "No, Garrett. It's your project. You should represent it. I believe you can do it." He looked disappointed, but nodded. "Good. I'll do my best to get the contract." When he was already at the door, I called out to him, "Garrett, how are things going with the apartment? Still paying the mortgage?" He sighed. "Yeah, Tabitha won't compromise. I've offered her different options, but she wants me to keep paying for everything until she decides what to do next." "What about a divorce?" I asked her bluntly. "She won't file for divorce. She says then she'd lose her right to be compensated for the division of property, and the property is mostly debts." He grinned bitterly. "The lawyer said I could file it myself, but it would be a long and expensive process, especially if Tabitha resisted." "I see," I nodded. "It's a tough situation." "Yeah," Garrett lowered his head. "But I can handle it. It just takes time." After he left, I thought about it. Garrett was changing from a spoiled brat to a man ready to take charge of his life. Maybe I should have been firm sooner. Maybe then he wouldn't have gotten involved with Tabitha. Wouldn't have gotten into debt. Regrets are pointless, though. You can't change the past. You can only move forward. Margaret called in the evening. Her voice sounded unusually calm. "Daddy, I want to apologize for what I said last time. I was upset and said a lot of unnecessary things." "It's all right, Margaret. I understand. Garrett told me about his new project. He's working so hard, Dad. He's working at the print shop, then he's working at the call center till night, and on the weekends he's working part-time as a courier. I'm glad to hear he's taking charge." "Yeah," she sounded proud. "You know, I've never seen him so, determined, even in high school when he was top of the class." "People sometimes need challenges to reach their potential," I said. "Maybe you're right," Margaret agreed. "But it still hurts to see him suffer because of Tabitha. She's acting." She paused, searching for words. "Not human. Blackmailing him, manipulating him. And he still loves her and hopes she'll come back." "She won't, Margaret. At least not to Garrett on his current income." "No," she sighed. "And honestly, now I'm not even sure I want her back. Garrett deserves better." That admission surprised me. Margaret had always supported her son's choice, had always seen Tabitha as the perfect